Welcome to part 2 of the Creepypasta Iceberg. If you haven't watched part 1, to summarize, this iceberg covers creepypasta from all across the internet, from old classics to Reddit no-sleep stories to ARGs and unfiction mysteries to questionable literary flops. This iceberg contains a huge number of different creepypasta stories and ranks them by how well known they are, with the absolute classics that even your mum knows at the top and the more unknown and esoteric stories down the bottom. Creepypasta has been a popular genre of online horror literature for over a decade now, and even all these years later it's still going strong. I'm actually super excited to get into part 2 of this iceberg since this layer has a lot of entries that I'd actually never even heard of, along with some absolute classics. So without further ado, let's get into it. Before we get into things, I just want to give a huge thank you to Opera for sponsoring this video. I'm pretty sure I speak for all of us when I say that default browsers can be pretty terrible, but that's where Opera comes in. Opera is faster, safer, and smarter than default browsers. It's fully featured for privacy, security, and basically everything you do online. It features a free VPN and ad blocker and easy access to all of your favorite apps such as Spotify, Apple Music, Messenger, and more. Opera also has the super cool feature called Tab Islands. This allows you to group and organize tabs for more contextual browsing, so you can have tab islands for work, play, shopping, and everything in between. Opera also has modular design with smooth, uninterrupted animations and a UI that changes and adapts as features are added and tabs are opened. Elements in the sidebar are dynamically adjusted as others are added, making space for more cutting-edge AI integrations and extensions. There's also Aria, Opera's native browser AI, which connects to the web to provide real-time information, gives you clear answers instantly, and generates content based on your ideas in just a few clicks. Importantly, unlike other browser solutions, Aria is user controlled, meaning that you can opt in or out. Opera flows and adapts to you and the way you browse, making for a completely unique and seamless browsing experience. Use my link below to download Opera today. A huge thank you to Opera for sponsoring the video, and now let's get into part 2 of the Creepypasta Iceberg. I also wanted to mention that soon I'm actually going to be releasing some new merch, and I am actually wearing it right now. The t-shirt says Raw. There's going to be a bunch of other stuff in a very similar vein. I'm also selling these like bands that say Rufflecopter, Waffles, and XD. So if you're interested in that, definitely keep an eye on izzies.com because that's where it will be launching, and I'm very excited for that. And yes, thank you for listening. As with the first iceberg, there are a few things that I want to cover really quickly before we jump into the actual berg itself. The berg? Sorry, I've never referred to it as the berg before. That was an off-the-cuff move. For the creepypastas on this list that have interesting histories, backstories, or have influenced internet culture in one way or another, I'll be diving into that since that's what I personally find most interesting. But if an entry on the iceberg is lacking in substantial information, I'll just give a brief run through of the story. This iceberg will contain some discussion of disturbing topics, however, in order to please YouTube's algorithm, we won't be talking about anything gruesome in too much detail, and any really disturbing or graphic entries will be very briefly mentioned or skipped altogether. I'm also super sorry, but on this tier there are just a couple of entries that I had to skip for the sake of time, but rest assured they will be included in the next installment. I also wanted to mention again that there are a few ARG and unfiction stories on this iceberg. I know they're not technically counted as creepypastas by most people, but they're fun to talk about, so I wanted to include them. Finally, I'd like to give a huge thanks to Reddit user Avag Skeletorium for creating this creepypasta iceberg. A link to the original will be included in the description below. Without further dilly-dallying, let's get into part 2 of the Creepypasta Iceberg. Candle Cove. Candle Cove is a now infamous creepypasta written in 2009 by author and web cartoonist Chris Straub. The story is told using the format of an old web forum, with a user called SkyShale033 posting a thread titled Candle Cove Local Kids Show. As more and more users comment on the thread, they slowly begin to piece together, through hazy childhood recollections, a local children's TV show called Candle Cove. As the thread develops, it takes on a bewildered tone as none of the users can believe what they had watched as children. The characters on the show were horrible, cheap-looking puppets with frightening voices. The villain was a skeleton called the Skin Taker with a cape of human skin sewed together in patches, and one episode consisted of the characters wildly convulsing and screaming for the entire duration. Everything begins to come together more clearly as each user corroborates and builds onto each other's stories. That is, until the final post. In the final post to the thread, a user claimed that they went to visit their mother in a nursing home, and upon being asked about Candle Cove, said that he used to tell her that he was gonna watch the show before sitting in front of a TV tuned to static for 30 minutes straight. Candle Cove is by far one of the most famous and influential modern creepypastas, even getting its own 6-episode season of the horror anthology series Channel Zero. Gateway of the Mind. In 1983, a team of scientists set out to prove the existence of God, hypothesizing that if a test subject was deprived of all of their senses, they would be able to feel the presence of God or some other divine figure. So they performed a complicated surgery on a test subject to sever the nerve connections to his brain for sight, hearing, taste, and feeling. I don't know, the less questions you ask about the logistics of this experiment, the better. The test subject soon claimed to hear the voices of the deceased and eventually went mad from the constant voices echoing in his head. He spent weeks ranting and raving, crying, and even trying to claw his eyes out. Eventually, he told the scientists that he had spoken to God and that he had abandoned them, before basically immediately dying. It's very Russian sleep experiment with a religious coat of paint, and whether or not you'll enjoy that depends entirely on whether that sounds appealing to you. For me, not so much. Antran. Antran is a short story set in the 70s about a man who found a strange rudimentary android-like being in a junkyard and adopted it into his family alongside his young son. They named it Antran after the text printed across its metallic body and quickly realized that it was no rudimentary science project but instead a highly advanced and seemingly sentient artificial being who integrated into the family. It was unable to speak but learned to do chores, mimic their actions, and even play happily with the man's son. However, after the android pinched the boy and the father yelled at it, a switch seemed to be flipped. It began leaving marks and bruises on the boy in secret, as well as standing silently at the end of his bed during the night, watching him. Once the father found out about this ongoing abuse, he stormed into its room only to find the window broken and the android missing. 4 months afterwards, it made its presence known, leaving scratches on the outside of the house and leaving tracks in the yard before eventually abducting the boy from his bedroom. I'd never actually read Antran before researching for this video, and I was very pleasantly surprised by how great it was. Unlike most creepypastas, it didn't drag on for endless, pointless, directionless chapters and was actually really concise, and the writing maintained a really eerie and uneasy atmosphere throughout. It was a genuinely great read, and I highly recommend if you have a few spare minutes. 1999. Gonna be brief with this one since it contains a lot of material that I don't think YouTube would be too stoked about. To summarize, 1999 is a creepypasta written as a series of blog posts which recounts the OP's childhood experience watching a local TV channel called Caledon 21. The channel aired a series of strange, low-budget shows all filmed in a dingy cellar, including Soup and Spoon, in which a can of soup and a spoon were suspended on strings and chased each other around, and most notably, Mr. Bear's Cellar. The show depicted a man in an old moth-eaten bear outfit interacting with various child guests in increasingly uneasy and threatening ways, always accompanied by an appeal to write a letter to Mr. Bear for the chance to visit his show. As you can probably guess, Mr. Bear ends up being a pretty creepy dude, and the OP actually narrowly avoids an encounter with him when he's invited to his cellar. It's very Candle Cove-esque and definitely has some quite disturbing content, but I found it really gripping and a very entertaining read. NES Godzilla. NES Godzilla, published to the Bogleach forums in early 2011, was written by a writer and sprite artist called Cosby DAF, and this is evident in the many impressive sprite artworks that accompany the story. In it, a man named Zack acquires a copy of the 1998 NES game Godzilla Monster of Monsters and boots it up, excited to feel a rush of old nostalgia. However, he soon realizes that there's something wrong with the game. Various enemies and bosses are replaced with new characters, and the entire game is littered with glitches. A strange entity begins stalking Zack through the game, known only as Red, a skeletal insect-like creature with a horrible gaping expression and game-breaking powers. NES Godzilla is genuinely one of, if not my favorite creepypasta ever. The story spans 8 chapters and includes over 100 incredible pieces of sprite art that really bring the entire eerie narrative to life. I know it goes against the entire spirit and point of the iceberg to be like, I'm not gonna explain it, you need to read it yourself, but I'm not gonna explain it, you need to read it yourself. The story is super dear to my heart, I read it at least once a year, so I implore you, if there's anything that you take away from this video, read NES Godzilla. It's fun, it's entertaining, you'll have a good time, I promise. I mean, it's not a legal guarantee, but I think you'll have fun. Anansi's Goatman Story. Anansi's Goatman Story is one of the most famous cryptid creepypastas on the internet. Told through a series of posts on 4chan's Xboard in 2012, it tells the story of the 16-year-old OP and his experience with a goatman type creature in the woods of Huntsville, Alabama. Anansi and 10 other teenagers were all hanging out in the woods on their parents' property, drinking and making s'mores on the fire by the trailers that they were sleeping in for the night. They began to smell a strange metallic ozone-like smell which persisted throughout their trip, and when several group members went off on their own in the dark and came sprinting back crying in a panic, the group locked themselves inside one of the trailers. The panicked teens explained that they had seen someone or something in the woods and that it had tailed them back to the camp, the disgusting coppery smell following them all the way. At this point, one of the teens begins babbling about the Goatman, a mysterious cryptid who can shapeshift and infiltrate groups of people, and I'm sure at this point you're kind of gathering where the story is going. The climax comes when the group realizes that there are in fact 12 of them in the trailer, one more than they arrived with, and that the Goatman has been living amongst them. The next morning, one of the group members describes seeing it stand up during the night and make jittery movements and heave like it was laughing before laying back down. The story plays on the classic monster among us trope in a really fun and inventive way, and the Deep South setting is actually really cool. My only criticisms are that it could have been written better. There are definitely large chunks of the story that could have been cut out or consolidated to make the story a lot more concise and easy to read. And also, the OP starts off using the green text format and then pretty much immediately stops, which firstly is really funny and secondly is a bit of a disappointment. Having the story written as a green text would have actually been a really unique format and would have set it apart from other similar cryptid campfire stories. Happy Appy. Happy Appy is actually kind of near and dear to my heart because, I'm not gonna lie, it's one of the worst creepypastas I've ever read, but as a kid, it scared the shit out of me. It's hilarious looking back at the story as an adult because now I can see that it was clearly an ironic, terrible on purpose piss take, but at the time I thought it was the most dark and disturbing piece of literature that I'd ever read as like a 12-year-old. In the story, a man discovers a lost preschool TV show called Happy Appy. Quote, its plot was about a giant clay apple with arms, baby blue eyes, and large dark green lips being held up by a bent rusty stick. He would go around in a white 1996 Ford Windstar helping children when they got injured. So you know, that gives you an idea of what we're dealing with here. Naturally, with this being a lost episode creepypasta, things quickly go downhill, with Happy Appy beginning to look at the camera with a deranged smile and go after the very kids that he was meant to help. And then the last episode of Happy Appy ends with a kid being killed in 9/11. And no, I'm not joking. Yes, that is a real thing that happened. Yes, I thought this was a serious piece of literature as a child. Does that shine some light on who I am now? Maybe. Mariana Mordegard Glezgov. In 2008, an urban legend began to develop around a mysterious video called Mariana Mordegard Glezgov, which was uploaded to YouTube. The video was only 20 seconds long and depicted a man staring at the camera bathed in harsh red lighting. As the video faded away, the man began to grin. A Ring-esque legend began to spread, claiming that anyone who viewed the video would be driven mad and that it had already caused over 100 people to gouge their eyes out and mail them to YouTube's headquarters, which is hilarious. But even more hilarious is the line, "It is not yet known how they managed to mail their eyes after gouging them out. You can't make this shit up." Wait, actually you can, because the entire thing was a hoax made by a user of eBombs World. Shortly after the original video was uploaded, another video came out debunking it, showing that the quote-unquote unidentified man in the video was actually an LA-based marketing consultant called Byron Cortez, and the eBombs World user had simply used his image to create a spooky little video. Internet users then ran with it, spinning a yarn about the nightmarishly haunted video and its violent curse, when in reality it was just a picture of a random guy with a red filter. Pen Pal. Pen Pal, written by author Dan Auerbach, is a series of interconnected short stories posted to r/nosleep. In these stories, the OP tries to make sense of a string of bizarre and frightening events that happened to him during his childhood. He wakes up in the woods in the middle of the night, he receives strange drawings of himself with an unknown man, and his best friend goes missing. Most notably, after doing a Pen Pal assignment at school, he begins to receive Polaroids of himself taken by an unknown third party, which causes his mother to call the police and eventually move out of the house. As the OP uncovers all of this as an adult, he slowly comes to learn that there was a man who was trying to abduct him, and he ended up going after his best friend instead. The OP's mother even reveals that his body was found, a fact that she kept from him as a child to protect him. Pen Pal is a pretty long read, even being made into a full-length novel, but it's a good one. And while it does suffer from was originally going to be a standalone story before being adapted into like a 5-part epic where things get a little bit silly and ridiculous towards the end, it's still worth reading if you're into this kind of pasta. Mr. Widemouth. Mr. Widemouth was written by Perfect Circle 35 and published at creepypasta.com in late 2010. It tells the story of a 5-year-old boy who, while bedridden with mono, begins receiving visits from a strange creature called Mr. Widemouth. The author likens Mr. Widemouth to a Furby, describing him as small with big ears and an exaggeratedly large grin. While the creature's visits start innocent enough, he soon begins tempting the boy into dangerous activities. He tries to get him to jump out of a second-story window onto an invisible trampoline below and tries to teach him juggling using a box of knives to practice with. Mr. Widemouth leads him to a trail out the back of the house, claiming that he has many friends about his age, and when they were ready, he took them to a special place down the trail. Even at the boy's young age, he becomes wary and fearful of Mr. Widemouth and his sinister intentions, so when he and his family move out, he decides not to tell him. Years later, as an adult, the author revisits his childhood home, which has since burned down, only to discover that the trail at the back of the house led to a graveyard. Barbie.avi. Barbie.avi is a 40-minute video of a young woman talking to the camera in the style of an interview with no sound. She appears to have just one arm and gets noticeably upset at certain points, even pulling on her skin. In the creepypasta of the same name, the author claims to have found the Barbie.avi file in an abandoned computer tower in a dumpster. Upon opening the file, he is unnerved and notices one part of the video shows legs walking down along train tracks towards an abandoned house. He figures out the location of the shack and visits it, though upon hearing creaking noises he quickly rushes off, frightened. Though the Barbie AVI videos have gained widespread popularity online, with many speculating over who this young woman is, there's no spooky haunted house mystery here. The woman in the video went by the alias Tammy, though her real name is not known, and she appears to have modeled for several companies who specialize in content featuring amputees, as far as I can gather. In the unaltered original videos, which have sound, Tammy is describing the incident which led to her amputation, thus the understandable display of emotion. Basically, Barbie.avi is simply an urban legend surrounding a low-budget modeling interview from the late 80s. Rugrats Theory. Okay, so as a kid, I remember the Rugrats Theory being this kind of spooky, creepy interpretation of the Rugrats TV show, and as an adult having reread through it, now I just see that it's literally insane. It's one of the most bonkers creepypastas that I've read in a hot minute. It's so overdramatic and off the wall in basically just every sense. The Rugrats Theory, also known as Rugrats Never Existed, theorizes that the entire show and all of the main cast are figments of Angelica Pickle's deranged mind. Quote, Chucky died in 1986 along with his mother, that's why Chaz is a nervous wreck all the time. Tommy was born in 1988, but he was a stillborn, that's why Stu is constantly in the basement making toys for the son who never had a chance to live. As for All Grown Up, the teenage Angelica became addicted to various narcotics which further aggravated her schizophrenia, bringing her back to her childhood and thus her creations she obsessed over. Because of the time lapse between the present and the last time she interacted with her creation, she made them older. Angelica was constantly taking hits of acid so she would never have to live without her creations, who were her only company. Yeah, there's a lot going on here, and I don't want to cast aspersions, but you know, something tells me that maybe this was written by a child. This didn't stop the creepypasta from somehow going viral and getting tons of news articles, as well as going on to popularize this childhood ruined it was all a dream genre within the creepypasta community, again, mainly among children. Lost episodes. This entry simply refers to the lost episode genre of creepypasta. These stories will generally take a popular TV show, most often a children's TV show, and make up a fake episode that has been lost to time. Common tropes within these creepypastas include being driven mad from watching the episode, gruesome images or photos of crimes being spliced in, and the studio covering up the existence of the episode as to not get bad PR. Popular examples of lost episode creepypastas include Dead Bart, Mouse.avi, and the Seinfeld Lost episode, which I'm actually not 100% sure is on this iceberg, but if it's not, I'm absolutely adding it. Brutal Obscene Beast. Brutal Obscene Beast, or Bob, is a creepypasta originally written on 4chan which describes a tall, white, armless being with a wide mouth and a few loose teeth. The creature possesses superhuman strength and can pea acid, I guess. And the various creepypastas that it features in basically just describe in graphic detail how it attacks and kills people, so not much to see here really. Creepypasta Files wiki user DaFunnyHam expertly summarizes the story, writing, quote, "This creature called Bob, bro. Tails doll. Tails doll is a playable character from the 1997 game Sonic R, which became the subject of a series of creepypasta stories. In the most popular story, The Curse of Tails Doll by Rebecca G, a father brought his son a copy of the game, and upon unlocking the Tails Doll character, the game system shut down. The father then woke up at 2 AM that night to thumping on the door and was horrified to discover a real-life Tails doll covered in blood abducting his son. Clearly this pasta is a riff on Sonic.exe, and unsurprisingly there are tons of crossover and shipping fanfiction of the two together. What can I say? Love is love. Plankton Got Served. Plankton Got Served is basically the exact same as Squidward's thing I can't say, which we covered in the last iceberg, but this one has Plankton dying instead of Squidward. Sorry this entry is so short, but there really isn't that much else to this one.
Rat Rat.
If there's one thing that you can say about Rat Rat, it's that it's a story. It alleges the existence of an instructional board game VHS tape with a creepy mouse mascot that curses whoever views it, and the tape gets all creepy and flashes gruesome images at you when you watch it. It's very Ring. There's this whole backstory about how the board game company got a manufacturer from Haiti to create the rat puppet for the video, and then one of the workers' young daughters got killed in the factory, and then she summoned a demon called Apparat and cursed every copy of the game in vengeance. And then the evil big shot CEOs thought that it was funny, so they decided to name the game Rat Rat as like an inside joke because it's an anagram of apparat. Get it? It's clever. I'm willing to give the story points for its absolutely wild premise, but it's basically like if the Ring and Mousetrap had a mutant baby, and that mutant baby was not very good at writing scary stories. But hey, at the end of the day, even the weirdest creepypastas have their charms, and it's someone's creative outlet. The author of Rat Rat is probably happy and fulfilled in life right now, and I'm in my bedroom reading creepypastas about evil rats, so who's really winning in life here? Nobody Saw It Coming. Nobody Saw It Coming is a short story written by Ivy Banks and posted to creepypasta.com in 2017. I'm not going to sugarcoat it, this one is kind of a tough read. Not because it's scary necessarily, but because it's just very weirdly written. There are quite a few grammatical errors, and I don't really know how to describe the writing other than uniquely hard to read. Like, I feel like I had to read every line twice for it to sink into my brain. It was very strange. To summarize, the story is a drawn-out description of a man entering a house and killing someone. At first it appears that he's frightened and trying to get away from a home intruder before it's revealed that in fact it is he who is the home intruder. Pretty shocking and mind-bending stuff.
Okay, sorry for the terrible mic quality, but I just wanted to add an addendum. When I was researching this, I found out that there's a big, like, fandom for the protagonist of the story. He's called Nathan the Nobody, and he's depicted as, like, a sexy murder man with long black hair. I just always think it's really funny when the protagonists of creepypastas are made into, like, bad boys and, like, people to fawn over and be in love with. So, I don't know, I just found it extremely funny, and I really wanted to share it with you. Please enjoy.
Pokemon Creepy Black. Pokemon Creepy Black, or just Pokemon Black, is one of many cursed Pokemon cartridge creepypastas. If you consume creepypasta at any level, you've probably heard one of these. Author finds a Pokemon game at a garage sale or in the attic, lists a bunch of spooky stuff that happens when they play the game, their Pokemon get hyper-realistic blood eyes, and then they end up cursed or plagued with nightmares for eternity. You know the drill. In Pokemon Creepy Black, the author finds a bootleg copy of Pokemon Red and Blue at a flea market, though the cartridge is completely black with no writing on it, thus the title of the creepypasta. In addition to the 3 starter Pokemon, one more was available, simply called Ghost. It used the Lavender Town Ghost Sprite and could only use one move, Curse, which would not only instantly KO any opposing Pokemon, but seemingly kill them as there would be one less Pokeball in the corner of battles. Ghost could also curse trainers, leading to their overworld sprite being replaced by a tombstone. At the end of the game, a sequence of Pokemon and trainers flashed up on the screen, which the author eventually realized was all of those killed by Ghost. He then had to face off against Ghost itself, though the only move he could use was Struggle, and the battle always ended in defeat, complete despite repeated playthroughs. Pokemon Creepy Black mostly follows the aforementioned too spooky Pokemon creepypasta formula, though I actually like it a lot more than its contemporary since I feel like it's a lot more subtle. The story goes for a more eerie, slightly existential vibe, and the author shows a lot of restraint by not adding scenes of Pikachu and Bulbasaur, but they have no eyes, and there's blood everywhere, and ooh, and also missing nose there. Fallout 3 Numbers Station. This entry refers to a popular urban legend surrounding the game Fallout 3. For context, in the game you can tune into various radio stations and listen while you play, and this urban legend claims that there is a secret numbers station that predicts future events. In order to access the numbers station, players would have to go outside the range of Galaxy News radio and be standing at a great height, with the creepypasta's author claiming that the mountainous areas around Raven Rock was the best location. The station would then spit out a series of random numbers, which was actually Morse code and could be translated into a series of grim future predictions for the real world. For many years this was a very widely circulated and even believed myth, however nowadays it's more widely understood as just a simple work of fiction. I think this one works so well because this is totally something that I can actually see being in Fallout as like an Easter egg. No End House. No End House, written by Brian Russell, is a creepypasta about a house that has no end. Ooh! The story follows a man called David as he enters a haunted attraction called the No End House, which challenges participants to get to the end of the 9 rooms to win $500. As David stumbles his way through increasingly strange and frightening rooms, he comes to realize that it is no mere haunted house but an otherworldly nightmare that he is now trapped in. The story became a classic and is often touted as an example of gold standard creepypasta writing, even being adapted into a 6-episode season of the creepypasta anthology series Channel Zero, the strangest security tape I've ever seen. This entry refers to an r/no sleep story of the same name written by a user called Powerhawk Mash. In it, a gas station employee's boss tasks him with watching over some work security tapes as his co-worker Jeremy is suspected of stealing oil, with entire shelves and boxes of it going missing after his shifts. As he watches the tapes, the author begins to realize that Jeremy has seemingly supernatural powers and has created a sort of time loop with the security tapes repeating over and over again. Upon looking at his files, it's discovered that Jeremy's listed address is actually a vacant lot, upon which once sat a family estate before it was burned down in 1933. The house was found doused in oil, and the family's estranged son was suspected of committing the crime but was never caught, naturally calling into question the real identity of Jeremy. Kagekau. Kagekau fits neatly into the sexy bad boy villain genre of creepypasta. You know, the type which was clearly designed for tweens to fawn over and ship with other spooky murder men. The character is a demon with powerful abilities and is described as, quote, playfully sadistic and a mischievous trickster. The Creepypasta Files wiki also describes his physical appearance, and I love it because if this doesn't sound like every overpowered Mary Sue character I ever wrote as a 14-year-old. Physically, Kagekau is a 5'4" grey-skinned male with short, fluffy, straight black hair and silver eyes. Unusual for a species, Kagekau's eyes glow depending on his mood. When experiencing positive emotions, they emit silver white light, and when experiencing negative emotion, they appear to suck in light from around him. Basically, this guy was genetically engineered to be the ultimate bad boy of the Tumblr sexy man creepypasta world, and you know what? I love it. At a certain point, you just have to respect it. And now we reach the end of the Creepypasta Iceberg Part 2. As I mentioned in the beginning, I actually found this one really interesting since now we're getting into the territory where I'm starting to not know the stories, so this is the first time that I've read a lot of these. Of course, there are absolute classics like NES Godzilla, Cove, and the Rugrats Theory, but then there are some that I had never even read that I actually really enjoyed, like Antran and even Mr. Widemouth. Again, also, as I mentioned, I'm really sorry that I had to miss out a few, just for the sake of time. I'm really sorry about that. Won't happen again, and I will definitely be including those in the next installment. And again, as I said last time, if there's any that I haven't mentioned or that you don't see on the iceberg that you think should be on there, definitely let me know, because I'm 100% up for adding some more stuff onto there to cover in the future. I really hope that you guys are enjoying this series. I'm really enjoying covering it because, as I said last time, creepypasta was my jam as a kid, and honestly I really love revisiting it nowadays. There are some that I don't like, some that are okay, and some that honestly I've discovered that I really love. Creepypasta is such an interesting, rich genre of story writing and literature online, and I feel like some people can they can be a little bit quick to discount it when there are some really wonderful stories and pieces of literature. and it has such an interesting and rich history as well that, I don't know, I just really enjoy covering it, and I really hope that you guys enjoy listening to it as well. For the next video, I'm probably going to be taking a little bit of a break from the Creepypasta Iceberg just because I don't want that to be like every video for the next like 3 months, because there are obviously a lot of tiers to this iceberg. So I'm probably going to do a different topic, and if there's any other topics unrelated to creepypasta, definitely let me know if you want me to cover that. But yeah, rest assured, another installment will be coming sometime soon in the future. And yeah, I really appreciate you guys listening. I apologize for all the weirdness with uploading and stuff like that. Again, I'm still getting into the gist of it, but yeah, it's slowly happening, and I'm really enjoying putting videos out again. So anyway, I'm going to start ranting, I'm going to start raving. I really hope that you guys enjoyed, and I really hope to see you in the next one. Bye! A huge thank you to my Garfield overlords over on Patreon: Sheriff Whiskey, Xavier Araujo, SHSL Sunson, Crep Gunderson, Sophie H, Simon, Katrina Likes 5e Stuff, Oliver Brains, Thigh Heavenly, Dozo Blint, Hazy, Leanne O, Matt LRJ, Michelle Olsen, A Riddle Wrapped in an Enigma Hidden by a Question Mark, Astrian Vortex, Joe Bradshaw, Strawberries, Helm Hamburger Hand, Chicory, Fitzy, Dana Homegardener, Jesse Chisholm, Charlie B, Brian Downey, Lee XX, Blue Mayfeld, and Doug. Thank you guys so much for supporting me. It means the world. If you want to join these guys over on Patreon, the link will be in the description. And yeah, thank you so much for supporting me. Thank you for watching the video. I really hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you in the next one. Bye!